The diamond glinted cruelly under the harsh fluorescent lights of the bank. It wasn't mine. It was supposed to be, but was that her voice actually telling the teller to put it in her safety deposit box? Did my own mother just do that? What would you have done if your future, everything you'd worked for, was locked away in a box you couldn't touch because of the woman who was supposed to love you most? It all started with medical school. I dreamt of becoming a doctor since I was a little girl, patching up my stuffed animals with mismatched buttons and declaring them cured. I aced all my science classes, volunteered at the local hospital, shadowed doctors, devoured textbooks like they were the most delicious novels ever written. Getting into medical school felt like the acceptance letter was thick, creamy paper, and I still remember the way my hands trembled as I opened it. Mom was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Pride, definitely. I could see it in her eyes when she told her friends about my daughter, the doctor, but there was also this underlying anxiety, like a hum that never quite faded away. Medical school is so expensive, Anya, she'd say, her voice tight. Are you sure we can afford this? I knew we weren't rich, not by a long shot. Dad had passed away a few years before, leaving Mom to run his small hardware store. It was enough to keep us afloat, but the idea of six-figure tuition, well, it was daunting. I'd worked hard for scholarships, pulling all-nighters writing essays and filling out applications. I managed to get a decent amount, enough to cover almost half the cost. I'll take out loans, Mom, I pleaded. I'll work part-time, anything. I can do this. She just looked at me, her expression a mixture of love and fear. Then came the day she dropped the bomb. I was home for the weekend, studying for an anatomy exam. She sat me down at the kitchen table, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. The kitchen, usually filled with the aroma of her famous apple pie, felt cold and sterile. Anya, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I've been looking at the finances again. My heart sank. I knew what was coming. The hardware store, it's not doing well. And your tuition, it's just too much. We can't afford it. Tears welled up in my eyes. But Mom, I stammered, I have scholarships. I can get loans. It's not enough, Anya. It's never enough. Her voice rose, a hint of desperation creeping in. I can't lose the store. It's all we have left of your father. The hardware store. It was more than just a business. It was Dad's legacy, his dream. I understood that. But giving up my dream felt like betraying him too, betraying myself. So, what are you saying? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She took a deep breath. I think you need to defer. Just for a year. We can figure things out then. Defer. A year. It felt like a lifetime. I knew deep down that a year would turn into 2, then 3, and eventually, never. Medical school wasn't something you could just put on hold and pick up later. The competition was fierce, the knowledge constantly evolving. I argued, I pleaded, I cried. But Mom was resolute. The fear of financial ruin had taken root in her mind, and nothing I said could dislodge it. In the end, I relented. I signed the deferral papers, a part of me dying with each stroke of the pen. The acceptance letter, once a symbol of hope and achievement, now felt like a cruel mockery, taunting me from its place on my desk. The following months were a blur of disappointment and resentment. I worked at the hardware store, helping Mom with inventory and sales. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't what I wanted. Every time I saw someone in a white coat, every time I passed the hospital, a pang of longing shot through me. I felt like I was living someone else's life, a life I hadn't chosen. Then Mom started talking about Daniel, Dr. Daniel Sharma. He was a cardiologist at the local hospital, the son of a wealthy businessman, and, according to Mom, a very nice young man. She'd met him at a charity gala, and apparently he was looking for a wife. He's so stable, Anya, she'd say, her eyes gleaming. And his family is very well off. You wouldn't have to worry about money ever again. I bristled at the suggestion. Marry someone for money? It felt repulsive. I wanted to marry for love, for connection, for a shared future, not for financial security. Mom, I'm only 22, I protested. I don't want to get married, especially not to someone I don't even know. She dismissed my concerns with a wave of her hand. Love comes later, Anya. Stability is what matters. Think about your future, your children. She started inviting Daniel over for dinner. He was pleasant enough, polite, intelligent, and undeniably wealthy. But there was no spark, no connection. We made small talk about medicine, about his practice, about the weather. It felt like an interview, not a courtship. And Mom, hovering in the background, beaming with approval, made it even more unbearable. He wasn't awful. Truly, he wasn't. He donated to causes, spoke intelligently, and was good to his mother. He simply was not my person. One evening, after Daniel had left, Mom cornered me in the kitchen. Anya, she said, her voice unusually serious, Daniel is a good man. He can provide for you, give you a comfortable life. I sighed. Mom, I appreciate that, but I don't love him. I don't even like him that much. Her face hardened. Love is overrated, Anya. You need to be practical. You need to think about your future. You're not getting any younger. Younger? I was 22. And what about my dreams, Mom? What about medical school? What about what I want? She looked at me, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of pity and exasperation. Medical school is a pipe dream, Anya. You need to be realistic. You're a smart girl, but you're not getting any younger, and opportunities like this don't come along every day. If you don't marry Daniel, you'll be working at the hardware store your whole life. You'll be a disappointment. A disappointment! The word hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Had I become so defined by my potential, my career, that my worth as a person now depended on my marrying a doctor? I felt a wave of anger wash over me, a fierce, burning anger that I hadn't felt before. I am not a disappointment, Mom, I said, my voice trembling with rage, and I will not marry someone I don't love, just to make you happy. I stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door behind me. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in bed, replaying the conversation in my head. Her words echoed in my ears, each one a tiny stab of pain. I knew she didn't mean to hurt me, but her expectations, her pressure, were suffocating me. I felt trapped, like a bird in a gilded cage. Days turned into weeks, and the pressure from Mom intensified. She kept singing Daniel's praises, highlighting his generosity, his intelligence, his stability. She even started planning the wedding, flipping through bridal magazines and discussing color schemes. I felt like I was losing control of my own life, like I was being swept away by a current I couldn't resist. Then Daniel proposed. It was a lavish affair, complete with a candlelit dinner, a string quartet, and a diamond ring the size of a small pebble. He got down on one knee, his eyes filled with sincerity. Anya, he said, his voice trembling slightly, I know we haven't known each other for very long, but I truly believe we can have a wonderful life together. Will you marry me? I looked at him, at his kind face, his earnest eyes. He wasn't a bad person. He was just not the person for me. I thought of Mom, of her expectations, of her fear. I thought of my dreams, of my passion, of the life I wanted to live, and I made a decision. Daniel, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I need some time to think about it. He looked crestfallen. Of course, he said, his voice dropping slightly. Take all the time you need. I thanked him, excused myself, and went home. Mom was waiting for me, her face etched with anticipation. Well? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I told him I needed time to think, I replied. Her face fell. Time to think? What's there to think about? He's perfect. I didn't argue. I just went to my room and closed the door. I knew I couldn't go through with it. I couldn't marry Daniel. Not for money, not for stability, not for anything. But what was I going to do? How could I disappoint Mom, especially after she'd sacrificed so much for me? I felt trapped between my own desires and my mother's expectations. Then I realized I wasn't actually trapped. That night, I stayed up late, researching. I explored different options, different paths. I looked into online courses, alternative career paths, anything that would allow me to pursue my passion without breaking the bank. And then I found it. A physician assistant program at a community college, close to home. It was a 2-year program, significantly cheaper than medical school, and it would still allow me to work in the medical field, to help people, to make a difference. I braced myself for her reaction, for the disappointment, the anger, the tears, but surprisingly, she was calm. "A physician assistant?" she asked, her voice neutral. "What's that?" I explained the program, the curriculum, the career prospects. I told her how I could still work in medicine, how I could still help people, how I could still make a difference. She listened patiently, without interrupting. When I finished, she just nodded slowly. "Well," she said after a long pause, "it's not medical school, but it's something, and it's certainly better than working at the hardware store." I breathed a sigh of relief. It wasn't the enthusiastic support I'd hoped for, but it was progress. It was a start. I enrolled in the physician assistant program that fall. It was challenging, demanding, and incredibly rewarding. I loved learning about the human body, about diseases and treatments, about the art of healing. I thrived in the clinical rotations, working alongside doctors and nurses, assisting with procedures and caring for patients. It wasn't medical school, but it was close enough. It was my path, my purpose. Mom, surprisingly, started to come around. She saw how happy I was, how passionate I was about my work. She saw how much I was learning, how much I was growing. She even started bragging about me to her friends, telling them about my daughter, the physician assistant. Daniel, however, was still in the picture. Mom kept insisting that I give him another chance, that I reconsider the proposal. She even invited him to my graduation ceremony, hoping to spark some kind of reconnection. I knew I had to put an end to it, once and for all. A few months later, Daniel announced his wedding to another woman, a doctor he'd met at a conference. Mom was ecstatic. "See, Anya?" she said, her eyes gleaming. "Everything happens for a reason. He's found someone who's his equal, someone who understands his world." I smiled, but inside I felt a sense of, well, not relief exactly, more like vindication. The wedding was a lavish affair held at a beautiful country club. Mom insisted that we attend, wanting to show Daniel that there were no hard feelings, that we were happy for him. I reluctantly agreed, knowing that it was the only way to appease her. As we were getting ready for the wedding, Mom handed me a small velvet box. "This is for you," she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. I opened the box and gasped. Inside, nestled on a bed of satin, was the diamond ring that Daniel had given me. "I thought you should have it," she said. "It's yours. You deserve it." I looked at the ring, at the sparkling stone, at the symbol of a life I had almost lived. And then I made a decision. "Mom," I said, my voice firm, "I can't accept this." She looked confused. "But why not? It's a beautiful ring." "Because it represents something I don't want, Mom. It represents a life I didn't choose. I don't need this ring to be happy. I have my career, my friends, my family. I have everything I need." I closed the box and handed it back to her. "You keep it, Mom," I said. "Sell it, donate it, do whatever you want with it. But it's not mine. It never was." Her eyes filled with tears. "Anya," she said, her voice trembling, I'm so proud of you." At the wedding, during the reception, as Daniel and his bride were cutting the cake, I asked to speak into the microphone. The music stopped. The crowd quieted. Mom looked at me with alarm. "I just want to say something," I began, my voice clear and strong. "To Daniel and Sarah, congratulations. I wish you both a lifetime of happiness." I paused, took a deep breath, and continued. "And to my mother, thank you. Thank you for teaching me the value of hard work, the importance of family, and the courage to follow my own path." Mom's face was a mask of confusion. She had no idea what I was about to say. "You see," I continued, my voice rising slightly, "my mother always wanted me to marry a doctor. She thought it was the key to happiness, the key to security. But what she didn't realize is that I already had everything I needed. I had my dreams, my passion, and the determination to make them a reality. I paused again, letting my words sink in. So, instead of marrying a doctor, I decided to become one. Well, not exactly. I became a physician assistant, and it's the best decision I ever made. A ripple of applause spread through the crowd. Daniel and Sarah looked stunned. Mom's face, well, her face was priceless. A mixture of shock, disbelief, and pride? And one more thing, I added, grabbing my bag from the table. I just heard back about my application. I start the master's program in public health. I know we struggled, Mom, to pay for my education. I am very happy to pay you back for everything and invest in a better future for everyone I can. Later that evening, as we were driving home, Mom, Anya, she said, her voice barely a whisper, I didn't know. I didn't realize how much you wanted this. I was so focused on providing for you, on making sure you were secure, that I forgot to ask you what you really wanted. I smiled and took her hand. It's okay, Mom, I said. We all make mistakes. The important thing is that we learn from them. And that's when I showed her the safety deposit box key. I took out a loan, Mom. I'm paying for that diamond myself. I'm going to sell it and donate the money to the hospital. No strings, no expectations. She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears, and squeezed my hand tightly. I'm so proud of you, Anya, she said. You're not a disappointment. You're amazing. That was 5 years ago. Today, I am a successful physician assistant, working at a clinic in a rural community, providing care to people who need it most. I love my job, I love my life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Mom, well, she's changed. She's still a little anxious, but she's also incredibly supportive. She's my biggest cheerleader, my confidant, my best friend, and looking back, I realized that my mom didn't try to ruin my life. She tried to protect me in the only way she knew how. She was scared, she was worried, she was desperate. But in the end, I showed her that I was strong enough to take care of myself, that I could achieve my dreams without sacrificing my happiness. The crimson sunset over the ruined castle I visited last summer reminded me of that night. The shadows, the crumbling walls, the vibrant colors fighting through the gloom. It was a perfect metaphor for my life, a life forged in the face of adversity, a life that is all the more beautiful for the struggles I've overcome. And that diamond? I sold it. Every single penny went to funding a new clinic in our underserved community. Now, instead of adorning someone's finger, it's saving lives. And Mom? She volunteers there every week. So what's the moral of the story? Maybe it's that you should never give up on your dreams, no matter how difficult they may seem. Maybe it's that you should always listen to your heart, even when it leads you down a different path. Or maybe, just maybe, it's that even the most well-intentioned people can make mistakes, and that forgiveness is always possible. I chose purpose, not pressure. I chose passion, not prestige. And I wouldn't have it any other way. What would you choose? And if you liked my story, please like and subscribe, and definitely write what you would choose in the comments. I read all of them. That master's degree was killer, by the way. All-nighters fueled by instant coffee, balancing clinic hours with epidemiology papers. There were times I felt like my brain was going to melt right out of my ears. But I was driven. I saw the gaps in our healthcare system, the disparities, the preventable illnesses that plagued our community. I wanted to be part of the solution, to make a real difference. There was one particularly rough patch during my second semester. I caught a nasty flu, the kind that knocks you flat on your back and makes you question your life choices. I was running a fever, coughing up a lung, and still trying to keep up with my coursework. Mom, bless her heart, was doing her best to take care of me, bringing me soup and tea and nagging me to rest. But even her loving care couldn't make up for the fact that I was completely exhausted and overwhelmed. One evening, as I was struggling to read a research paper through blurry eyes, I broke down. Tears streamed down my face as I confessed to Mom that I didn't think I could do it, that I was going to fail, that I was going to let everyone down. She held me in her arms, rocking me gently like I was a child again. "Anya," she said softly, "you're strong, you're smart. You can do anything you set your mind to. Just take it one day at a time, and don't be afraid to ask for help." That night, I actually listened to her. I emailed my professors, explaining my situation and asking for an extension on my assignments. To my surprise, they were incredibly understanding. They granted me the extension and even offered to meet with me to go over the material I had missed. That was a game changer. It reminded me that I wasn't alone, that there were people who believed in me and wanted to see me succeed. So I kept pushing, kept studying, kept working. And eventually, I made it through. Graduation day was a blur of emotions, pride, relief, gratitude, and a healthy dose of exhaustion. Mom was beaming, of course, taking a million pictures and telling everyone within earshot that her daughter was a master of public health. I couldn't help but laugh. I had come so far. From almost marrying a cardiologist for stability, to charting my course, to actually creating stability for others. With my master's degree in hand, I started working on a new initiative at the clinic, focusing on preventative care and community outreach. We organized health fairs, offered free screenings, and provided education on healthy eating and lifestyle choices. I was in my element, using my knowledge and skills to make a tangible impact on people's lives. One day, I received a letter from the medical school I had deferred from all those years ago. It was an invitation to an alumni event, a celebration of their graduates' achievements. I almost threw it away. The memories were still raw, the disappointment still lingered. But something made me pause. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was a desire for closure. Maybe it was just plain stubbornness. I decided to go. Walking into the medical school building was like stepping back in time. The sterile hallways, the anatomy posters, the faint smell of formaldehyde. It all came flooding back. I saw some familiar faces, classmates I had lost touch with, professors I had admired. They were all doctors now, successful, accomplished. And there I was, a physician assistant with a master's degree, feeling like an imposter. The event was awkward. People were polite, but I could sense the unspoken questions, the subtle judgments. I felt like I had to constantly explain myself, justify my career choice, prove that I was still worthy. One of my former professors, Dr. Reynolds, approached me, a kind smile on his face. "Anya," he said, "it's so good to see you. What have you been up to?" I told him about my work at the clinic, about the preventative care initiative, about my passion for public health. He listened intently, nodding thoughtfully. When I finished, he said, "You know, Anya, you're doing important work, maybe even more important than some of the doctors who graduated from here." I was taken aback. "What do you mean?" I asked. He smiled. "Medicine isn't just about treating illnesses, Anya. It's about preventing them. It's about reaching out to the community, educating people, empowering them to take control of their health. You're doing that, Anya. You're making a real difference." His words meant the world to me. They validated my choices, affirmed my path, and reminded me that success isn't always measured in degrees or titles. As I was leaving the event, I ran into Daniel. He was there with his wife, Dr. Sarah, who, it turned out, was incredibly nice. "Anya!" he exclaimed, his face lighting up. "It's so good to see you. What are you doing here?" I explained that I had been invited to the alumni event. He looked surprised. "Really? That's great. You should come to our house for dinner sometime. Sarah would love to meet you properly." Sarah smiled and extended her hand. "It would be our pleasure," she said. "We've heard so much about you." I politely declined, explaining that I was very busy with work, but as I walked away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of contentment. Everything had come full circle. I had faced my fears, overcome my obstacles, and created a life that was both meaningful and fulfilling. And I had done it all on my own terms, without compromising my values or sacrificing my happiness. Back at the clinic, I got a call that changed everything yet again. There was a grant, a huge one. Enough to... The waiting room ceiling leaked. The exam rooms were tiny. The equipment was, well, ancient. It was a chance to build something amazing, But the application was insane. Pages and pages of data, projections, justifications. It was a Herculean task. I remember sitting in my tiny apartment, surrounded by piles of paperwork, feeling utterly defeated. It was late, I was exhausted, and I was starting to doubt whether I was even capable of pulling it off. I called Mom. "I can't do this," I sobbed into the phone. "It's too much. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough." She listened patiently, without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Anya, you are smart enough. You are good enough. You've overcome so much already. Don't give up now. You can do this." Then she told me something I hadn't heard in years. "Remember the hardware store?" she asked. "Remember how your father and I built it from nothing? It wasn't easy. There were times we wanted to quit. But we didn't. We kept going, one brick at a time, until we had built something amazing." "You're your father's daughter, Anya. You have his strength, his determination. You can build something amazing, too." The memory of my father, of his unwavering work ethic, of his quiet strength, filled me with a renewed sense of purpose. If he could build a hardware store, I could write a grant application. I consulted with experts, gathered data, and crafted a compelling narrative that highlighted the urgent need for funding. I barely slept, barely ate, barely saw my friends or family. I was completely consumed by the task at hand. And then I clicked the submit button, my heart pounding in my chest. It was done. Now all I could do was wait. The waiting period was agonizing. Every day felt like an eternity. I checked my email obsessively, hoping for some news, any news. I tried to distract myself with work, but it was no use. The grant application was always on my mind. Then, one morning, I received an email with the subject line, "Grant application decision." I held my breath and clicked on the email. I scanned the text, my eyes darting back and forth, searching for the verdict. And then I saw it. "We are pleased to inform you that your grant application has been approved." I burst into tears. I had done it. I had secured the funding to build a new clinic, a clinic that would provide quality health care to our community for years to come. I ran to Mom's house to tell her the good news. When I arrived, she was in the garden tending to her roses. "Mom!" I shouted, my voice trembling with excitement. "We got the grant! We got the grant!" She turned around, her face beaming with joy. "Oh, Anya!" she exclaimed, running to embrace me. "I knew you could do it! I'm so proud of you!" We celebrated that night with a bottle of champagne and a home-cooked meal. It was the perfect ending to a long and arduous journey. Building the clinic was another challenge, of course. There were permits, contractors, unexpected delays, and budget overruns. But I never gave up. I knew that this was my purpose, my calling, and it was a beautiful building, bright and spacious, with state-of-the-art equipment and a welcoming atmosphere. It was a place where people could come to receive quality health care regardless of their income or background. And it was all thanks to that diamond, to that moment of defiance, to the realization that my worth wasn't defined by who I married, but by what I could achieve. The gardenia I planted outside the front door reminds me of that every day. Now, opening that clinic, that was a whole new level of stress. I remember staring at blueprints that looked like ancient hieroglyphics, trying to decipher plumbing schematics and electrical diagrams. I felt so out of my depth. I'm a physician assistant, not a construction manager. There were so many setbacks, delays, and unexpected expenses. The original contractor went bankrupt halfway through the project, leaving us with a half-finished building and a mountain of unpaid bills. I almost lost it. I seriously considered giving up, selling the property, and moving to a tropical island. But I couldn't. I knew that the community was counting on me, that there were people who desperately needed access to quality health care. So, I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. I found a new contractor, negotiated new contracts, and personally oversaw every aspect of the construction. It was exhausting, frustrating, and at times downright infuriating. But I persevered. I learned about building codes, zoning regulations, and the subtle art of dealing with grumpy plumbers. And slowly but surely the clinic started to take shape. There was one particular incident that almost pushed me over the edge. We had ordered a shipment of new medical equipment, including an expensive ultrasound machine. The delivery truck arrived late one afternoon, and as the workers were unloading the equipment, they dropped the ultrasound machine. It crashed to the ground, shattering into a million pieces. I stood there, speechless, staring at the wreckage. I wanted to scream, to cry, to punch something. I had to stay calm, had to figure out a solution. It was a tough decision, but I knew that we needed that ultrasound machine to provide the best possible care to our patients. I stood there, watching as patients streamed in, their faces filled with hope and gratitude. I had done it. I had built something amazing, something that would make a real difference in people's lives. One of the first patients we saw at the new clinic was an elderly woman named Mrs. Rodriguez. She had been suffering from chronic pain for years, but she couldn't afford to see a doctor. She had heard about our new clinic and decided to give it a try. I examined her, ordered some tests, and developed a treatment plan that included medication, physical therapy, and lifestyle changes. Within a few weeks, Mrs. Rodriguez was feeling much better. Her pain had subsided, she was able to move more freely, and she had regained her zest for life. She came back to the clinic every week for follow-up appointments, and we developed a close bond. She became like a grandmother to me, sharing her wisdom, her stories, and her delicious homemade empanadas. Seeing the positive impact that our clinic was having on people's lives made all the hard work and sacrifices worthwhile. It reminded me why I had chosen this path, why I had given up medical school, why I had persevered through all the challenges. I was making a difference, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Even Mom started volunteering at the clinic a couple of days a week. She helped with administrative tasks, greeted patients, and generally made herself useful. She even learned to speak some Spanish so she could better communicate with our patients. It was amazing to see her so engaged, so fulfilled. It was a far cry from forcing me into a marriage I didn't want. One afternoon, as I was working late at the clinic, I received a phone call from Daniel. I hadn't spoken to him in years. He was calling to ask for my help. His wife, Sarah, had been diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. They had been to numerous specialists, but nothing seemed to be working. He had heard about my work at the clinic and wondered if I had any contacts, any resources that could help. I hesitated for a moment. Part of me wanted to hang up, to tell him that I was too busy, that I didn't have time for his problems. But then I thought of Sarah, of her kindness, her warmth, and I knew that I couldn't turn my back on them.